Most men today are not weak. They are trained to appear harmless. And that might be the most dangerous lie modern society has ever sold them. Look around, really look, and you'll notice it instantly. Voices soften mid-sentence the moment tension enters the room. Opinions get diluted into something safe, digestible, forgettable. Men laugh at things they don't even find funny, just to avoid standing out. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't kindness. It isn't emotional intelligence. It's fear dressed up as virtue. Now let me ask you something. When did being non-threatening become the same thing as being respectable? Because if we're honest, most men today aren't trying to become stronger, they're trying to become acceptable. They've convinced themselves that blending in is success, that keeping everyone comfortable is a form of power, that being liked by strangers somehow outweighs being respected by the people who actually matter. But beneath all of that, there's a quiet panic, a fear of rejection, a fear of conflict, a fear of being seen too clearly. And then there's you. You don't rush to explain yourself when you're misunderstood. You don't shrink your presence just to make a room feel lighter. You don't twist your words to avoid making someone uncomfortable. There's something about the way you move, the way you speak, the way you hold eye contact just a second longer than most people can handle. It's subtle, but it unsettles people. And because they don't understand it, they give it a label. Intimidating. You've felt it, haven't you? Maybe not said directly, but always implied. He's a bit intense. Hard to read. There's something off about him. But let's be honest. Did you actually do anything wrong? Did you threaten anyone? Cross a line? Or did you simply refuse to dilute who you are just to be easier to digest? Here's where it gets interesting. If Niccolo Machiavelli were observing your life right now, he wouldn't be impressed by how polite you are or how agreeable you seem on the surface. He would reduce everything about you to one ruthless question. Is this man easy to control? Because in a world built on subtle manipulation, social pressure, and unspoken hierarchies, the most dangerous man is not the loudest one in the room. It's the one who cannot be bent. And that changes everything, because suddenly, the traits people criticize in you start to look very different. Your silence isn't awkward, it's calculated. Your calm under pressure isn't passive, it's controlled. Your ability to read people, to see through tone shifts, contradictions, hidden intentions, it doesn't make you popular, it makes you unpredictable. And unpredictability has always been a form of power. But here's the part most people won't say out loud. This isn't about acting tough. It's not about puffing your chest out or performing some exaggerated version of confidence. That's theater. That's insecurity trying to wear a mask. What we're about to break down is something far quieter, far colder, and far more real. It's the kind of presence that makes people second-guess themselves without you saying a word. The kind that forces others to reveal who they really are, simply because you didn't react the way they expected. So here's the promise. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why people perceive you the way they do, and more importantly, how to turn that perception into an advantage. We're going to break down 7 signs you have a dangerous, intimidating personality through the lens of Machiavelli's darkest observations about power, control, and human nature. And if you recognize yourself in these signs, don't take it as a flaw. Take it as a warning. You were never built to be harmless. Number 1, it's not your voice. It's not your body language. It's not even what you say. It's your eyes. And if you've ever been told you're too intense without opening your mouth, this is exactly where it's coming from. Because a dangerous man doesn't reveal himself when he speaks. He reveals himself in the way he looks at people before a single word is exchanged. And you've felt this happen, haven't you? That moment where someone breaks eye contact first, shifts their posture, laughs nervously, or suddenly starts over-explaining something you never even questioned. Let me make this uncomfortably real for you. Think about the last time you were in a room, maybe a meeting, maybe a casual gathering, and someone was talking, trying to assert themselves, trying to subtly dominate the conversation, and while everyone else nodded along, smiled, played the game, you just looked at them, silent, steady, not reacting the way they expected, and something shifted. Their tone changed, their rhythm broke, they started justifying things they didn't need to justify. That wasn't accidental, That was exposure. Your eyes didn't attack them, they revealed them. Now here's the part most men will never admit. The average man's gaze is weak, not because he lacks strength, but because he's been trained to seek approval before he even realizes it. His eyes are constantly asking silent questions. Am I being accepted right now? Did that land well? Do they still like me? And that need leaks through micro movements, quick glances away, restless scanning, subtle tension in the face. It's a quiet form of begging, and people feel it instantly, even if they can't explain it. But your gaze, it doesn't negotiate. It doesn't check the room for permission. It doesn't soften itself to be easier to digest. There's a stillness there. And that stillness is what unsettles people, because it signals something most of them don't have: a decision already made. If Niccolo Machiavelli were analyzing you, he wouldn't care how charismatic you sound or how socially polished you appear. He would lock onto one thing. Do your eyes belong to a man who has already chosen his path, or to someone still waiting to be told who to be? And this is where the internal conflict comes in, because part of you already knows this about yourself, and another part of you has tried to suppress it. You've caught yourself softening your gaze in certain situations, haven't you? Forcing a smile, looking away too early, diluting that intensity, because you could feel the tension it created in the room. You've felt that subtle pressure to be more approachable, more normal, less you. And every time you did that, something in you pulled back slightly, like you were betraying a version of yourself that doesn't need permission to exist. Here's the truth most people aren't ready to hear. When you look at someone without seeking approval, they don't feel attacked, they feel measured, and being measured triggers something primal. It forces them to confront the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. That's why they say things like, "Why are you so serious?" or "Relax a bit." What they really mean is, the way you're looking at me is making me aware of myself, and I don't like it. We're living in a time where most eyes are numb, overstimulated, glued to screens, chasing dopamine hits, never fully present in a real interaction. People glance, they don't look. They react, they don't observe. So when someone like you shows up with focus, with awareness, with that quiet, controlled intensity, it feels abnormal, not because it is, but because it's rare. And that's why your gaze alone changes the dynamic before anything even begins. It signals that you're not there to be approved, not there to perform, not there to submit to the unspoken social script everyone else is following. You're there on your own terms, and that makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability is something weak people instinctively fear. Number 2, you don't just hear people, you read them, and that alone puts you in a position most men will never reach. Because while they're busy reacting to words, you're tracking patterns, inconsistencies, micro shifts that expose what's really going on beneath the surface. Let me make this uncomfortable for you. Think about the last time someone sat in front of you, telling a story, explaining themselves, maybe even trying to impress you, and something didn't sit right. Not what they said, but how they said it. That slight pause before a key detail, the unnecessary extra explanation, the forced laugh that came half a second too late. You caught it, didn't you? And you didn't say anything, you just noted it. That's the difference. Most men feel something is off and immediately override it because they want the interaction to stay smooth, they want to be liked, they want to avoid friction. But you don't rush to resolve that tension. You sit with it, you let it breathe, you let the person keep talking, digging deeper into their own performance, and the more they talk, the more they reveal. It's almost surgical. You don't interrupt the operation, you observe it. And if you're honest, this didn't come from nowhere. There was a time when you didn't read people like this. There was a time you took words at face value, trusted what you were told, believed intentions matched actions. And then something shifted. Someone you trusted contradicted themselves. Someone who smiled in your face moved differently behind your back. Someone's words said loyalty, but their behavior screamed convenience. That's when you stopped listening like everyone else and started watching. If Niccolo Machiavelli understood anything at a deep level, it was this: people rarely reveal themselves directly. They leak who they are in fragments, in patterns, in moments where they think no one is paying attention. And that's where you operate now. You're not paranoid, you're calibrated. There's a difference most people are too naive to grasp. Paranoia invents threats. Observation detects them. You notice who only calls when they need something, and how their tone subtly shifts depending on what they want from you. You notice who disappears the moment you're no longer useful. You notice how someone speaks about others when they're not in the room, knowing full well that one day, you'll be that other person. You watch how quickly someone changes their personality depending on status, how they soften around power and sharpen around weakness. These aren't small details, these are patterns, and patterns don't lie. And here's the part that unsettles people the most about you. You don't react immediately. You don't call them out, you don't create drama, you don't expose them in the moment. That's what amateurs do. You let them finish. You let them believe their act is working. And then quietly, without announcement, you reposition, you reduce access, you stop sharing certain things. You adjust proximity without explanation. One day they realize they're no longer as close to you, and they don't even know when it happened. This is where manipulators lose control, because their entire strategy depends on you staying emotionally reactive, predictable, easy to pull with guilt, flattery, or pressure. But when they try that with you, it falls flat. The guilt doesn't land. The flattery feels hollow. The emotional bait doesn't hook you. It's like watching someone try to unlock a door with the wrong key over and over again. And they feel it. They see it in your face. That quiet recognition that says, without words, I know exactly what you're doing. So what do? They label you, too cold, too analytical, overthinking everything. It's not that deep, but it is that deep. They just don't want you operating at that depth because it removes their leverage. What they're really saying is, you're not as easy to influence as everyone else, and that makes you a problem. Most people want to be believed. They rely on words being enough. But you measure alignment. Words versus behavior, promises versus patterns. And when those two don't match, you already know which one to trust. That's what separates you. That's what isolates you. And that's exactly what makes you dangerous in a world built on performance and illusion. So don't treat this like a motivational line. Treat it like a standard you refuse to lower. If you've recognized yourself in this, write this in the comments as a line you operate by, not something you hope to become. I don't listen to words. I track patterns. Number 3. This one isn't something you learned. It's something that was forced into you, carved into you under pressure. And if you're honest, part of you wishes it didn't have to happen this way. But another part of you knows you wouldn't be who you are without it. Because your presence right now, that heaviness people feel when they're around you, that quiet intensity that makes weaker men slightly uncomfortable, it didn't come from books or podcasts or motivation. It came from moments where things got real, and nobody came to help you. Think about it, those nights where sleep wasn't even an option because your mind wouldn't switch off, running numbers, calculating survival, wondering how long you could hold everything together before something broke. That feeling of checking your bank account not once, but 3-4 times before making a basic decision, not because you're careless, but because you know what it feels like to have nothing left. Most people talk about stress like it's a concept. You've lived it as a reality. And then there's the part you don't talk about, the betrayal. Not from strangers. That would be easy to process. I'm talking about people you would have stood beside without hesitation, people you defended, trusted, invested in. And then one day, without warning, you saw it clearly. They were never really on your side. Their loyalty had conditions. Their respect had limits. And when it mattered most, they chose themselves. That moment changes something in a man. Not loudly, but permanently. Here's the truth most people won't admit. That version of you before all of this, the one who believed things would work out fairly, who assumed good intentions, who gave access too easily, that version had to die, and in its place, something colder was built. Not cruel, just aware. You stopped expecting fairness. You stopped assuming loyalty. You stopped handing pieces of yourself to people who hadn't earned it. That wasn't bitterness. That was calibration. Pressure reveals truth, and you've been under enough pressure to know exactly how you respond when things stop being comfortable. That's why you don't panic the way others do. That's why chaos doesn't shake you the same way. You've already been there, and this is where the disconnect happens between you and most people. They're reacting to inconveniences. You're calibrated by survival. Someone complains about something small, something temporary, something irrelevant, and you can't even take it seriously. Not because you're arrogant, but because you've seen what real problems look like. You've been in situations where the outcome actually mattered, where mistakes had weight, where consequences were real. So when people bring you surface-level drama, it feels like noise. But here's the part that creates tension. They can feel it. They can feel that you're not impressed, not easily shaken, not emotionally pulled into their world. And they don't know how to label it, so they default to the usual words. You're too guarded, too cold, too distant. What they don't understand is simple. You're not closed off, you're filtered. There's a difference. Your scars don't show on the surface, but they're in everything. In the way you walk into a room without needing validation, in the way you stay composed when plans fall apart, in the way you don't overreact, don't chase, don't beg. You've already been at the bottom, and once you've tasted that, most threats lose their power over you. Fear doesn't disappear. It just stops controlling your decisions. And that's what people pick up on. Not your story, your result. They sense you've been through something, they just can't identify what. And that uncertainty creates distance, because men who've never been tested don't know how to relate to someone who has. You remind them, without saying a word, that their comfort is fragile, and yours isn't. So don't reduce this to some shallow mindset shift. This is identity. If you recognize yourself in this, don't write something soft or performative. Write this like a line you've earned, not borrowed. Pain didn't break me. It built something most people can't handle. Number 4, your power isn't in what you say, it's in what you're willing to not say, and most men will never understand this because silence terrifies them in a way they can't even explain. Try this and be honest with yourself. When the room goes quiet, when there's no music, no notifications, no distraction, what happens inside your head? Do you stay still or do you reach for something to fill the gap? Because that urge right there, that itch to break the silence, that's not boredom, that's dependency. Most men can't sit in silence because silence forces them to confront something they've been avoiding, themselves. So they talk, they joke, they scroll, they interrupt, they fill every second with noise just to avoid that moment where there's nothing left to hide behind. But you've already been there. You've sat in that quiet long enough to know what lives there. Regret, clarity, unfinished thoughts, hard truths. And instead of running from it, you learn to sit with it. Now here's where it becomes dangerous. Picture this. You're sitting across from someone, maybe in a meeting, maybe on a date, maybe just a casual conversation, and instead of rushing to respond, instead of nodding and filling space like everyone else, you just pause. You hold eye contact, you say nothing. Watch what happens next. They start talking more. They start explaining things you never asked about. They justify decisions you didn't question. Their tone shifts, their body tightens, their words become less controlled. It's subtle, but it's there. Your silence didn't create pressure, it revealed it. This is what most people don't realize. Silence is not empty, it's a mirror. And most people hate mirrors. If Niccolo Machiavelli understood one thing about power, it's that exposure rarely comes from force, it comes from restraint. A man who talks too much gives away his position, his intentions, his weaknesses. He shows his hand without even knowing it. But a man who listens, who pauses, who speaks only when necessary, that man becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability forces respect. You've probably noticed this without consciously thinking about it. When you speak less, people listen more. When you don't react immediately, people lean in. When you finally say something, it lands. Not because you raised your voice, but because you didn't waste it. Your words aren't filler, they're signal. And in a world drowning in noise, signal stands out. But here's the tension. People don't know how to handle it. They'll try to pull you out of it. Why are you so quiet? Say something. You're too serious. It sounds casual, but it's not. What they're really saying is, your silence is making me aware of myself, and I don't like what I'm seeing. Because when you don't perform, when you don't rush to comfort the space, when you don't validate their presence with constant reaction, they're left alone with their own thoughts, their own insecurity, their own need for approval. And that's where most men fold. They break the silence to ease other people's discomfort. They start talking not because they have something to say, but because they can't handle the weight of the moment. And every time they do that, they give up a little bit of control. But you don't. You let the silence sit there, heavy, deliberate, controlled. You don't rush to rescue the conversation. You don't perform to keep things smooth. You observe. You wait. You decide when the moment is worth speaking into. And that alone shifts the dynamic in ways most people will never consciously understand. They just feel it. Because when a man is comfortable in silence, he's no longer seeking validation through noise. He doesn't need to prove his presence. He doesn't need to be acknowledged to feel in control. And that makes him very difficult to manipulate, because most manipulation relies on emotional reaction, on impulsive speech, on filling space too quickly. So don't treat this like some social skill to practice. This is a threshold. Either you can sit with yourself, or you can't. If this is you, don't write something generic. Write something that reflects the standard you actually operate by. Number 5, this is where most men break without even realizing it, not in some dramatic collapse, but in small, quiet decisions they justify to themselves every single day. Choosing comfort when they should have chosen pressure. Let me ask you something, and don't answer it quickly. When was the last time you deliberately chose the harder option when the easier one was right there, within reach, almost inviting you to take it? Because that moment, that exact moment, is where identities are built or destroyed. Picture this. Your alarm goes off earlier than it needs to, and there's that split second where your mind negotiates with you. Just one more hour, you deserve it. You've earned the rest. And for most men, that's enough. They roll over, they delay, they drift back into comfort. But there's another version of you, the one you've been feeding quietly, that recognizes that voice for what it is, weakness disguised as reason. And when you get up anyway, when your body is heavy, your mind resisting, your environment still asleep, that's not discipline in the motivational sense people talk about. That's a decision to reject softness. And it doesn't stop there. There are moments no one sees. Working when you don't feel like it, pushing through physical pain when your body is telling you to stop, saying yes to opportunities that make you uncomfortable because you know staying the same is more dangerous than failing. Most people avoid these moments because they've built their entire life around minimizing discomfort. They optimize for ease, for convenience, for short-term relief. But what they don't realize is that every time they choose comfort, they're trading something far more valuable, their edge. You've seen it happen. Men who used to have potential slowly becoming average, then stagnant, then irrelevant. Not because they lacked ability, but because they chose the easy route too many times. It's subtle, almost invisible at first, but over time it compounds. Comfort doesn't destroy you overnight, it erodes you slowly. And this is where you separate yourself, whether you fully realize it or not. You don't trust a life that feels too smooth. There's something in you that questions it, that resists it, because deep down you understand something most people don't. Comfort comes with a cost, and that cost is fragility. The more you depend on ease, the less you can handle pressure. The less you can handle pressure, the easier you are to control. The men who survive chaos are never the ones who lived in comfort before it arrived. They're the ones who prepared when they didn't have to, who trained when no one was watching, who sharpened themselves long before the test appeared. You're not reacting to life, you're anticipating it. And here's the part most people misunderstand about you. You're not doing this for validation. You're not posting it, you're not announcing it, you're not seeking recognition for it. In fact, most people have no idea what you're building behind the scenes. They just feel the result, the discipline, the control, the consistency, and it makes them uncomfortable, because standing next to someone like you forces them to confront their own avoidance. So they label you obsessive, extreme, no balance. But those labels aren't observations, they're defense mechanisms. Because if you're not extreme, if you're not too much, then the uncomfortable truth is, they're just not doing enough. And here's the internal conflict you've felt. There are days you want to switch it off, to take the easier route, to relax into what everyone else is doing. You're not immune to that pull. But every time you give into it, even slightly, something in you notices. Something in you loses respect. And that feeling, that quiet disappointment in yourself, is worse than the discomfort you were trying to avoid in the first place. So you choose differently. You choose the path that builds you, not the one that soothes you. You choose resistance, because resistance creates capacity. You choose pressure, because pressure reveals strength. And while everyone else is preparing for comfort, you're preparing for reality. Unpredictable, unforgiving, and indifferent. Number 6. This is where control either owns you or completely loses its grip on you, and most men never even realize they're being controlled because it doesn't look like force, it looks like approval. It looks like fitting in, being accepted, not rocking the boat. But strip it down to its raw form, and it's simple. The moment a man becomes afraid of being disliked, he becomes programmable. Think about it. How many times have you watched a man change his tone, his opinion, even his values depending on who he's around? He agrees in one room, disagrees in another, laughs at things he doesn't find funny, stays quiet when he should speak, speaks when he should stay quiet. Not because he's strategic, but because he's afraid of losing approval, of being excluded, of standing alone. That fear doesn't just shape his behavior, it owns it. Now here's the uncomfortable part. You weren't always immune to this either. There was a time you felt that pull, that need to explain yourself, to soften your stance, to make sure people understood you so they wouldn't misjudge you. You've caught yourself over-explaining before, haven't you? Adding extra context, extra justification, trying to control how you're perceived. And if you're honest, it never really worked. People still formed their own conclusions anyway. That's when the shift started. You realize something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You cannot control how people interpret you, no matter how clearly you explain yourself. So instead of chasing approval, you started withdrawing from that game entirely. And that's where your power began to return. Now when you say no, it's clean. No performance, no apology layered on top, no unnecessary explanation to make the other person feel comfortable. Just no, and you move on. That alone changes the dynamic more than people realize. Because most men decorate their boundaries with guilt, soften them with hesitation, dilute them until they barely exist. But when your no stands on its own, without negotiation, it forces people to confront something they're not used to: resistance. If Niccolo Machiavelli understood anything about power, it's that a man who depends on public approval can never make real decisions. Because real decisions come with friction. They upset people, they create tension, they go against the majority. And if your identity is tied to being liked, you will always choose comfort over truth. You've stepped out of that. You walk away from people who drain you, even when it's inconvenient. You distance yourself from environments that require you to shrink, even if it costs you opportunities. You let people misunderstand you, and this is where it becomes dangerous. You don't rush to correct them. That's the part that unsettles people the most, because they expect you to defend yourself, to justify, to explain. And when you don't, it creates a gap they can't fill. So they label you arrogant, cold, selfish, disconnected. But those labels say more about their expectations than your behavior. What they're really reacting to is this: they can't influence you the way they influence others. Guilt doesn't land. Social pressure doesn't move you. Emotional manipulation doesn't hook you. And when those tools stop working, the only thing left is to discredit you. But here's the internal tension you felt, because walking this path isn't comfortable. There are moments where being misunderstood costs you, where standing alone feels heavier than going along with the group, where silence creates distance. You're not blind to that. You feel it. But you've already made the trade, respect over approval. And once you make that trade consciously, everything changes. You become selective, not closed, not hostile, selective. You listen to people who've earned that position, who've proven their judgment, their loyalty, their consistency. But random opinions from people who haven't built anything, haven't lived your reality, haven't earned your attention, those opinions don't even register anymore. They're background noise. And that's what makes you dangerous. Because once a man no longer fears disapproval, he becomes extremely difficult to control. He's no longer negotiating his identity based on external feedback. He's operating from something internal, stable, independent. And that kind of man disrupts systems built on validation. So don't reduce this to confidence. This is sovereignty. Number 7. This is the one people feel but can't explain, the one that makes them slightly uneasy around you without knowing why. Because in a world where everyone is constantly exposing themselves, you don't. And that alone breaks the pattern they're used to reading. Look at how people live now. Everything is broadcast, every emotion, every plan, every frustration documented in real time, like they need an audience just to feel real. They overshare with strangers, they reveal their insecurities, disguised as authenticity. They leak their intentions before they've even acted on them. And what they don't realize is, every piece of information they give away reduces their leverage. It makes them predictable, easy to read, easy to handle. But you move differently. Think about it. When someone meets you for the first time, what do they actually know about you? Not much. And that's not an accident. You don't rush to fill the silence with your life story. You don't volunteer details just to build artificial connection. You don't expose your plans before they're executed. You let conversations breathe. You reveal selectively. You hold things back, not out of insecurity, but out of control. And here's where it gets interesting. People start leaning in. You've seen it happen. Someone asks you a question, you give a simple answer, nothing more, nothing extra, and instead of the conversation dying, they get more curious. They ask another question, then another, trying to figure you out. Meanwhile, you're watching them slowly reveal more about themselves than you ever offered. That's not charisma, that's asymmetry. Information is leverage, and the less of it you give away, the harder you are to control. Because once people know your motivations, your limits, your fears, they know where to apply pressure. But when those things are unclear, they hesitate. And hesitation is power. There's a reason people feel slightly on edge around you. Not because you're aggressive, not because you're hostile, but because they can't categorize you. You don't fit into the usual boxes. You're not overly expressive, not overly reactive, not easily predictable. And when the human mind can't label something quickly, it treats it as a potential threat. So they start asking themselves questions they can't answer. What is he really thinking? What does he actually want? How far would he go if pushed? And that uncertainty forces a level of respect most men try to demand but never get. You don't ask for it, you create it by default. But here's the part most people get wrong. You're not acting mysterious. You're not playing a role. This isn't some tactic you switch on and off. This came from experience, from learning the hard way that when you reveal too much, people use it. They analyze it, they store it, they bring it back at the right moment. You've seen your own words twisted before, your vulnerabilities exposed in ways you didn't expect. So you adjusted. Not closed, controlled. There's a difference most people will never understand. You don't hide everything, you filter. You decide what's relevant, what's earned, what stays with you. You let people see enough to interact with you, but never enough to map you. And that changes the dynamic completely. Because when people can't read you, they stop treating you like something casual and start treating you like something they need to be careful around. And here's the internal tension. Because part of you knows that opening up would make things easier, faster, more socially comfortable. You could connect quicker, be more liked, be more understood. But you've already seen the cost of that. You've already paid for that mistake once. So now, you choose differently. You choose control over exposure, precision over impulse, silence over unnecessary explanation. So don't turn this into some surface-level idea of being mysterious. This is about protecting your position. Before you type anything, pause for a second and feel the weight of what you've just heard. Because this isn't content you scroll past and forget. This is the kind of thing that either exposes you or confirms exactly who you've been becoming. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't about surface-level traits. It's about patterns that most people never become conscious of. So if it hit, don't comment something empty. Write this like a line you're willing to stand behind. Mystery isn't something I perform. It's something I protect. Now step back and look at the full picture, because what we just broke down isn't random. It's a system. Eyes that don't seek approval. The ability to read people beyond what they say. Scars that rewired how you move through the world. Silence that exposes others. A willingness to choose discomfort when everyone else chooses ease. A detachment from opinions that used to control you. And a level of privacy that keeps people guessing. These aren't isolated traits. They point to one thing, and one thing only: you are not easy to control. And that changes how the world interacts with you. Because most systems, social, professional, even personal, are built on predictability, on people reacting the way they're expected to react, following pressure, seeking validation, staying within invisible boundaries. But you don't move like that anymore. You don't respond the way people anticipate. You don't bend where others bend. And when someone realizes they can't read you, can't influence you, can't push you in the usual ways, they don't say, "This man has discipline." They say, "There's something off about him."
They
don't say, "There's something off about him." They say, "There's something off about him." That's the label they use when they lose leverage. If Niccolo Machiavelli were watching this, he wouldn't romanticize it. He would say something far more direct. A man who cannot be easily controlled is always perceived as a threat, whether he intends to be or not. And that's where most men make a critical mistake. They think being dangerous is enough. It isn't. Because without control, that same intensity turns inward. You've seen it before, maybe even felt it yourself. Men who develop this edge but don't direct it properly, they self-destruct. They isolate without purpose, burn bridges unnecessarily, turn coldness into arrogance, discipline into obsession, detachment into emptiness. They don't become powerful, they become unstable. And instability is just another form of weakness, dressed differently. That's why this next part matters more than everything we covered. Being dangerous is only valuable if it's controlled. A man with edge but no direction becomes chaos. A man with edge and discipline becomes strategy. One destroys himself. The other shifts the balance of power quietly, without needing to announce it. He walks into a room and doesn't need to dominate it. The room adjusts to him. So if you recognized yourself in this, don't fall into the trap of thinking you've arrived. You haven't. This is just awareness. Now comes refinement. Sharpen your discipline. Tighten your standards. Cut what weakens you, even if it's comfortable. Direct your focus towards something that actually deserves that level of control you've built. Because the world doesn't need more harmless men. It's full of them. Men who agree with everything, stand for nothing, and change direction depending on who's applying pressure. What's rare, and what actually shifts outcomes, is a man who can handle pressure without breaking, who can read reality without flinching, who can operate without needing constant validation. That's what you're building. So don't apologize for it. Don't dilute it to make other people comfortable. And don't waste it on things that don't matter. If you're ready to take this beyond awareness and actually turn it into leverage, into control over your decisions, your environment, your direction, then stay here, subscribe, and keep watching. Because what comes next isn't for everyone. It's for the few who are done being shaped by the world and are ready to start shaping it. And before you leave, don't write something weak. Write something that reflects the standard you're choosing to live by now. I am not here to be controlled. I am built to decide.